Welcome to the We Are VIP podcast. Each week, your host, Casey Hasten, Director of Recruiting at VIP, will bring you valuable insights from thought leaders, introduce you to incredible companies, and bring you tips for landing your dream job from our team of executive recruiters at VIP. And now, Casey Hasten.
Welcome to the We Are VIP podcast, a podcast devoted to adding value to your career or candidate search, brought to you by VIP. I'm your host, Casey Hasten. I'm an executive recruiter, director of recruiting with VIP, and your all-around hiring guru. And you know I love to bring you extra special guests each week to share how to increase your mindset or just, find that better job and find that culture that you're looking for. And today's no different. So today on the show, I'd like to welcome Dr. Elia Gourgouris, founder of the Happiness Center and founding partner of the Global Institute for Thought Leadership. Dr. Elia's mission is to make the world a happier place by helping C-suite leaders and their teams achieve their highest potential and create an empowering culture of accountability, productivity, and happiness within their organizations. Dr. Elia, I am so excited to have you here with us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
And we were just chatting, like the first time we talked, you were not even in the U.S.
I was in Europe in the middle of the pandemic. I know, kind of crazy, but life is too short, so do not procrastinate your happiness. That's my motto for today.
I love that. That makes so much sense. And, and I think after we talked and you kind of shared some of your wisdom on happiness with me, I've really kind of taken that to heart. And I'm not putting anything off anymore that, so many people say, I'll do that when I retire, right? I'm not doing that anymore. I'm making moves now, and I'm much happier for it. So thank you already.
You're welcome. And I think too often people live in the future, right? When the kids come, or when the kids leave the house, or when I get this raise, or when I get that job, or when I retire. And if the pandemic has taught us nothing more than the fact that there's no guarantees in life. None of us are guaranteed we'll be here next year, even next month. And I'm not being morbid about it. I'm just being realistic. So as a result of that, live your best life now, live your happiest life now, and just enjoy life, because life is very precious, isn't it?
Okay, show's over. That's all you need to know.
Michael.
I like to start the show talking about how we got connected. I think it's so important that people manage their connections and work on their connections, right? So do you remember how we got connected?
I am guilty. I don't. I was going to ask you that off. Thanks a lot for putting me on the spot.
Especially after I asked you not to put me on the spot earlier, right?
How did we get connected? Tell me. I would mean to ask you that.
I believe, if I'm not mistaken, we were connected by the fabulous Berta Medina.
Oh, of course. Of course. And she's the great connector. I mean, Berta is amazing. Yes, the great connector. Indeed.
She is. And I met her through another great connector that I just absolutely adore. And he has started a networking group. And there's like all these great connectors that are coming together. And I'm like, how did I get in here?
Well, you know what? That's one of the blessings of 2020 and the pandemic and people working from home. A lot of them working, I spent half my life on Zoom and LinkedIn, basically. But I've met more quality people, including yourself, including Berta this year, through these networks and through these connections. And I would never be on this if life was back to normal. So that's one of the things that I'm grateful for 2020. It's, everyone has to be flexible, and we'll talk about flexibility later on in the show, but be flexible and great things happen in life.
Absolutely. So what inspired you to create the Happiness Center?
You know what? I was finishing the first half of my career when I was a clinical psychologist in private practice. I loved it. I got burned out towards the end. And I was thinking about what to do next. And, the great Greek philosopher Aristotle said that happiness is the whole purpose and meaning of life, the whole aim and end of human existence. Now, think about that statement. Happiness is everything. And, I'm the happiness doctor, so I thought about creating the Happiness Center. It was just an inspiration that I had, an idea. I didn't even know where that would lead. And it's really attracted other thought leaders around the world that I collaborate with, and we try to help organizations, employee engagement, productivity. We'll talk about all that stuff, but happiness, I'm really passionate about it on an individual level, but also on an organizational level.
So, and I'm going to toss one out there that's a little bit different, but can a person realistically expect to be happy all the time?
No, I don't think that's realistic. I mean, even I was kind of born happy, and happiness is my natural state of being. But we all have ups and downs in life, and that's normal. And if we didn't have those, I don't think we would appreciate the happiness and the joy that we have in life. So let's put it this way: I've learned more from setbacks, more from disappointments, more from when things did not work out than when things were going well. So I really value the fact that we have adversity in life. As a matter of fact, I say we're all graduates from the University of Adversity, all of us. And that's the University of Life, in essence.
Oh, I like that. I'm going to so steal that from you. University of Adversity. I love it.
Isn't it true, though? I mean, if inevitably, all of us are going to lose loved ones eventually. We're going to lose our grandparents initially and our parents at some point, and God forbid, our sibling or a significant other or even a child, which happens, tragic. Best friends, we're going to suffer from physical ailments. I'm not even counting the pandemic, cancer, heart, diabetes and all that stuff. Financial strain, maybe underemployment, unemployment, bankruptcy. We're all going to suffer from some of those things. And that's part of the adversity of being in this life. Now, the question, of course, is it possible to be grateful in the midst of adversity? And that's the key. That's what differentiates happy people from unhappy people. Because when everything is going well, to be grateful, that's easy. That's a piece of cake, obviously. But how about when you're facing adversity? Can you still be grateful for the lessons learned?
I'm so glad that you brought that up because I think a gratitude practice is so important. And I do think that a person will tend to be happier if they have a gratitude practice, right? And I know personally, each morning I write down a minimum of 3 things that I'm grateful for. And I try to do the same thing in the evening and bookend my day with gratitude so that, it just sets your day up right and it sets your night up, your sleep up well too.
I mean, you get extra credit. I mean, you're A plus. I usually tell people do one or the other. And some people like to do it first thing in the morning before they do anything else. They write 3 things down they're grateful for. But other people wait until the very end of the day and they reflect back and say, what transpired during the day that I'm really grateful for? And they do it that way. I mean, there's no right or wrong way. The fact that you're doing it on both ends is even better. But and remember, you can't be grateful and depressed at the same time. It's physiologically impossible because when we're in a grateful state, there are chemicals that are released in our brains that counterbalance, depression. And so you can't be, and that's the quickest way for me to go from being down to being happy and up is to be in a grateful and do it mindfully, like consciously. What am I really grateful for? That list, by the way, Casey, is endless. You could write 3 things every day for 365 days and not have them be the same thing. That's how wide and vast gratitude really is, if you think about it.
Yeah, and now that you say that, I don't recall writing down the same 3 things ever in my journal. So I think you're absolutely right. Although I will tell you, morning fires in the fireplace are my favorite. Just totally grateful for those. It's the little things, right?
Of course. And the fact that you love it and you appreciate it, because not everybody has that every morning, as you know.
Right.
So be grateful that you have access to it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we know happiness is important on an individual level, but how does employee happiness affect a company's bottom line?
My God, it's huge. First of all, let's start with the fact that happy people tend to be healthier. I'm talking about physically healthier, which means that they miss less time from work because they actually show up and they're healthier. They're not depressed. They're not stressed out. They're not anxious. They're more creative. They're more innovative. I actually think they're better teammates because if my batteries are full, and when we talk about somebody who's happy as an individual, that means they practice self-care greatly, meaning they take care of themselves physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. So their batteries are full for the most part, obviously not perfection, but most days they're that way. As a result, they have extra to give to their teammates and lift them up with positivity and optimism. So they're better teammates. They're more collaborative, greater retention, less turnover because they're happy, where they're at. And as a result of that, they're more productive. Well, if you have employees that are more productive, that clearly impacts the bottom line, which is makes the company or the department or the division more profitable. The funny thing is that I started preaching that when I started the Happiness Center back in 2005. And this is before a lot of the studies, Harvard and Gallup and all the great studies that have been done, they hadn't happened yet. So a lot of my clients were like, Dr. Elia, we like you. You're a nice guy. You don't know what the hell you're talking about. I pay these people to work, and I get to work. Because I didn't have the studies to back me up. Now my work is a lot easier now because all the studies I've done, and obviously there's a direct link between happiness and corporate wellness, and that's my expertise in productivity and profitability for an organization. So.
Well, and I can tell you, I've worked in companies that were very toxic in the past. And it was so funny because even right before I came on this podcast today, we have one of our teammates that works remotely because he moved and the company didn't want to lose him. So they allow him to work remotely. He moved out of state, but he came back into town and he came and worked in the office today. And I mean, we were just laughing and cutting up, and it just it felt so good to have him back in the office. Not that we don't laugh and cut up, but it was just so welcoming for him to be back. And so I can definitely see you talk about how the happiness affects teamwork and collaboration, but why do you think that is?
I just think because people that are happy come from an abundance mentality, meaning that if I share my knowledge and if I help somebody else and make the team stronger, that's going to benefit everybody, rather than having a scarcity mentality, which is like, I'm going to work in my little silo and not collaborate and talk to anybody else in the office. And I love the fact that you talked about toxic environments and toxic cultures. I want to ask you a question. Why do talented employees leave companies? Why do they do that?
Well, I can tell you why I left, because I was miserable.
Exactly, because you were in a toxic environment, and that could be because they never truly leave companies. They leave their manager, their boss, because it's unsustainable, and they don't want to work under such an environment. And the senior leaders should be shocked. It's like, what? Casey left? How did that happen? How did we lose her? Versus saying, you know what? There were hints along the way, and you were ignoring those hints. And at some point, people have had enough, and they take off.
Absolutely. And the place I'm thinking of right now was back in my accounting days, before I switched to recruiting, and I would literally cry at work. It was so bad. And I didn't even make it a year.
Nobody should cry at work.
No.
As a matter of fact, there's a great conference, a global conference coming up at the end, almost a year from now, next December in Europe, called Happiness at Work. And some of the greatest minds in the corporate happiness and wellness will be speaking there. And that is the whole idea, right? What impact would it have? Let's give a simple example. Usually when people get off work, back in the day when we could actually go to work and come home, but imagine that, we're back to that. They come home from work, they walk into the house, and their significant other says, "How was work today, honey?" "Oh, it was terrible. It was like me, miserable. I was so stressed out. I can't stand it." That's the energy that person brings into the home, with maybe perhaps even little kids listening in. That's one scenario. Now let's take the happiness at work scenario. Drives home, is being asked the same question, "How was work today, honey?" And what if their response was, "You know what? I had a great day today at work. I collaborated with one of the best folks ever. We came up with these new ideas, innovative, creative. I can't wait to go to work tomorrow." Now, what will the energy be in the home for the rest of the evening?
Oh, it's going to be so high.
Exact night and day. And that's why we're investing. I'm going to be speaking at that conference, actually. It's in Belgium, December 13th next year. And I mean, people from Harvard, some of the top minds in terms of happiness, because we want to create happiness at work to become something that's talked about every single day. I know we talk about employee engagement and we kind of flirt around it in corporate wellness, but we want to talk specifically about what is the impact when you have happy employees and they're happy at work. How does that impact the rest of society outside of work?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, and I'm going to apologize for just 1 second. Never happened before on a podcast, but my phone is in here and went off. We'll just mute it real quick. Talk about
There's always
rookie.
Time. That's okay. That's all right.
82 episodes. It's never happened. So All right, so you talked about there were the warning signs, like when I left that toxic employer and there were hints. So what can an employer or how can an employer identify when their employees are unhappy and what steps can they take to resolve this?
So in my last book that came out this May, which is Seven Keys to Navigating a Crisis, I created a personal health assessment for employers to give to their employees. That it's basically 20 questions, 5 questions for your physical health, your emotional health, your mental health, and your spiritual health, which actually gives you an idea. There's the total score, of course, and this is on a scale of 1 through 5, 5 being I'm doing great, 1 I'm totally suck at it or whatever. 3 is I'm doing it sometimes. The employer will have, if they want to help them see, what areas are my employees struggling. Maybe somebody's really struggling emotionally and mentally, and then they can do something about that to help them. Maybe they're struggling physically or maybe even spiritually. The biggest challenge right now across the globe in organizations, the number one challenge is this: to ensure the physical and mental well-being of their employees. That's challenge number one. If you look at HR, this comes from senior HR leaders across industries, across sizes of companies, and across the globe. Casey, that even wouldn't make the top 10 in the past. And that's number one. That's the biggest challenge right now. The second challenge, of course, is, how do we improve employee engagement, productivity, and effectiveness, which is normal. But you can't get number two until you ensure that number one is fixed. So employee happiness and wellness, both physically and mentally, right now, it's at the top. So once you have the assessment, you know what areas you need to help somebody with, and you provide them the resources. The one thing, because I work during the pandemic, um, when we wrote the book, we actually wrote it for individuals to help individuals. We never thought that companies and organizations would seek us out. And I want to say about middle of June or so, when the first opening of the economy began to happen after the first lockdown, we had companies reach out and say, we need help. We don't know what to do with our employees. They're traumatized, they're upset, PTSD, they're stressed out, they're depressed, they're anxious, and so on. And the first company that reached out to me that they said come in was Bank of America in New York. And they said, can you do like a presentation, a webinar, how to navigate this crisis for our employees while they maintain their happiness and engagement levels? And I'm like, sure. So at 1,000 employees, I did my thing. They liked it so much that they now have made it available to all 200,000 B of A employees across the country. And I don't say this, I mean, obviously that's a great compliment, but more importantly, the need is great. People are really, really struggling. And to maintain employee morale even during a crisis, is it possible? It's just as possible as being grateful in the middle, being the University of Adversity story that I shared with you. It is possible, but it takes work. I mean, it's not magic, but you can't be passive about it. You have to put your self-care first. I mean, that's one of the main keys. How well will you take care of yourself? And senior HR leaders need to be doing that to their employees. Specifically, when I train them, I said, even if it's remote, when you check in with your employees, don't ask them how they're doing. They're all going to say, I'm fine. And there's going to be silence. Close the door, lean into the camera and say, how are you really doing? How's your family? How's your spouse? How are your kids? What can we do as a company, or what can I do as your HR, director to help you out? And furthermore, so in other words, be authentic and be real and caring and more empathetic than ever before. The other thing about senior leaders is this: they need to show up with complete transparency and vulnerability. What does that look like? It looks like if you're my employee and I'm your director, Casey, I'm going to lean into the camera and say, you know what? I've been struggling too. This pandemic has been really hard. I've been kind of depressed. And, I usually don't get that way, but I've been down too a few times. The loneliness, the isolation, I miss seeing you guys in the office. I miss walking around and checking in. It's been really hard. As leaders, we need to do that moving forward. Not like, well, everything is fine with me. How are you doing, loser? So it can't be like that. I know they wouldn't say that out loud, but you know what I mean. We have to show up the way that we want. If we want our employees to trust us and to open up to us, we have to be open, an open heart and an open mind, and be vulnerable and real. And they will respond to that. I promise you that.
I love what you said about being vulnerable because, there's a big movement about that right now with Brene Brown, and she's done so much research on it, just like you've done so much research on the happiness, just finding that place of happiness. So your best-selling book, 7 Paths to Lasting Happiness, focuses on creating a roadmap to lasting happiness. How can someone take the steps to take accountability for their own happiness in their professional career?
And I love that. I say, if it's to be, it's up to me. In other words,
Love it.
like if I'm not happy, I can blame. It's very easy to blame other people. And as a matter of fact, in terms of navigating a crisis, or any crisis, not just a pandemic, a financial, any crisis, even at work, there are usually 4 personality types. The first one is the victim, and the victim, like, why is this happening to me? Poor me, right? The second one is the critic, and the critic will criticize whatever the company says or does, whatever, the federal, state, or local government, the World Health Organization, it doesn't matter. They criticize everything. A simple, silly example, of course, is Elia, you should wear a mask when you go outside. Well, that's stupid. Okay, Elia, never wear a mask when you go outside. What are you trying to do? Kill me? So no matter what they do, they criticize everything. Then you have what we call the third type, is the bystander. Mind you, a good person, but the deer with the headlights look. They're so overwhelmed by all the changes that are taking place that they don't know what to do, so they do nothing. They might look to the left, to the right, look at the neighbor, but they're frozen in fear. And what all 3 of these personality types have in common is they don't offer a positive solution. They don't take any responsibility for their lives, and whether the victim, the critic, or the bystander. Now we come to the 4th personality type, which we call the navigator. And the navigator is somebody who takes responsibility for their lives, starts with a positive attitude. In other words, this too shall pass, whatever this is, whatever the crisis might be. And they practice self-care, because the responsibility is on who? You to make me happy? No, I'm responsible for my life. And I'm responsible for my career. As a matter of fact, successful people in business and in life have the same disappointments, let's say, make the same mistakes that everybody else does, but they do 3 things differently. This is what differentiates them from everybody else. Number 1, they take personal responsibility for whatever happened. This is on me. Nobody put a gun to my head. I made this decision. I own it. So they own it. Number 2, they learn from it. So they don't keep repeating the same mistake over and over again. And number 3, which, Casey, I actually think number 3 is even more important than 1 and 2, personally, they have the ability to let it go. In other words, they don't carry the mistakes and the disappointments from 2020 into 2021, or from last month to next month, or from last week to this week, or from yesterday to today. I own it, I learn from it, and then I let it go. And therefore, they move forward in their business and in their life unburdened. They don't carry this dead weight from things that happened in the past. And that's what makes them more successful than somebody else.
I'm like having such a hard time sitting still right now because everything you're saying, I'm just like, yes, yes, yes. So I love what you're saying about all of that. And, and I would like to think that when you talk about those different personalities, that I am the navigator and that I do these things. But I will tell you that third one, letting go, that's a toughie.
But you know what's beautiful about this is, and this is my psychologist hat on, those 4 personality types exist within each human being. It's not like I'm the navigator all the time. For example, when the pandemic hit in March, I speak internationally all over the world about happiness. You know what happened? In 1 week, all my speaking engagements got canceled, one after another, canceled again. And you know what? I had the bystander look. I was like, what am I going to do now? I was frozen initially, and I felt like a victim. Like, why is this happening to me? I was supposed to speak in Barcelona in October, which I ended up doing the conference but it wasn't Barcelona. I did it here in Zoom. Not quite the same.
Not quite the same.
And have I been critical of the government from time to time? Of course I have. But here's the thing. If I'm critical for six months, I rob myself of happiness. If I'm frozen for 2 weeks, I rob myself of, if I play the victim and the violins come out and all that stuff, who am I hurting? Myself. So what I did is I navigated, I pivoted. I through flexibility again, and wrote this book, Seven Keys to Navigating a Crisis, which has become a great hit and an acclaimed book. I wasn't planning to write a book this year. That wasn't even part of the equation, But that's what you do. You through flexibility and adaptability, you switch and you become productive.
Well, let's talk about your new book for just a second because we're almost out of time and I definitely want to address it. So, the newest book, The 7 Keys to Navigating a Crisis, focuses on developing more resilience and flexibility to face challenges. So, I mean, you kind of alluded to this earlier, but why is flexibility so important?
It's the key. If it's not that the strong will survive a crisis, it's the flexible. And the analogy that I use the oak tree and the palm tree. So the oak tree is this massive, huge tree, tall, been around for 100 years. But in a storm, if there's enough saturation, enough rain, and enough wind, what happens to oak trees? They come crashing down on cars, people, homes, right? The palm tree, on the other hand, relatively thin, will bend. And at the peak of the storm, and I'm talking about even the storms of life, sometimes it will bend all the way parallel to the ground. But when the storm passes, the palm tree rises up again and survives. And that is symbolic of our lives and how we live our lives. And so people have said, Dr. Elia, well, what is an oak tree? I understand the analogy. I like it. It's very visual. But
Hmm.
what is an oak tree in human terms? What does that sound like? An oak tree person is a person that says, well, that's the way things have been done around here for 40 years. I'm not going to change now. This is the way I do things. Well, you know what? During the pandemic and other crises, if you're not flexible, you're going to fail. You're going to be left behind. But the flexible not only will survive the crisis, but will thrive through the crisis.
That is so good. There were
Like,
so
think about that. No, think about it, what I'm saying. So I'm asking you guys to be palm trees, not oak trees.
right.
Seriously.
And I think, as I look at my career and I take it back to me because I'm the only one I really know that well, I think about that flexibility, moving out of a 20-year career that didn't suit me and being flexible and nimble enough to move into a completely different career, right? And kind of doing that again now, going from, I'm still recruiting, but going to coaching. And right now, there's no better time to be a coach. People
Right.
need
Exactly.
coaches and they want
But
them.
that's because you're listening. You're flexible and adaptable. And I love the word nimble. Those are the people that will thrive during a crisis.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This has been so amazing. I could talk to you all day and just sit here and just really just stare at you because I don't feel like I've added much to the conversation, but it has been amazing. But we are going to have to wrap this up. I'm going to shed a little tear. Um, but I do want to
Well,
ask
we
you,
can do it again in the future. We got to be flexible. We can do a part two at some point.
let's do it. We'll do it again.
Okay.
So, but let's go ahead and get to our VIP questions. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, these are fun. These are just for fun. So, and I'm really
Okay.
curious because I don't think I've had a psychologist on the show before. So, I want to see what you say.
And
So,
I'm a corporate psychologist. So think about it that way now.
oh
Not the
boy.
clinical anymore, but the corporate. So okay, let's hear it. All right.
All right.
What do you got for me, Casey?
So, if you were chosen to be one of the first colonists on Mars, Elon Musk calls you up. What 3 things or people would you take with you?
That's a great question, but there's a very easy answer to that. If you're going to be taking part in one of the greatest adventures in the history of humankind, I would take my wife and 2 boys, my kids, because
There you go.
I would want to share that with the people that I love the most. I mean, the greatest adventure ever, right? So there you go.
Absolutely. That was easy then for you.
Uh, Yeah, I mean,
um, so, what's one thing you do each day to set your day up for success?
you know what I do, and I've started doing that even during the pandemic more. I want to say back in April, I used to walk like 3 days a week for an hour because I had to. I'm getting older and I got to move and get an exercise. It was like I had to stuff part. Since April, I've been walking every single day, 3 miles a day, no matter what. I've created a new habit, part of my self care, because as my stress level increased, my self care had to increase. So when I walk, and I don't always do it with my phone. Sometimes I just look at the blue sky and I listen to the birds and I take the fresh air and I meditate or I talk to my higher power. I connect with nature, which is really important to do on a daily basis, and that fuels me for the day. It lowers my stress level. It lowers my anxiety level, and there's something about there's movement, nature, quiet, introspection, listen to your intuition, to that still small voice inside. That's how I start my day every day. And I'm hoping that this habit actually continues long after the pandemic is gone. I'm not like, seriously, every single day I do that.
I watched a movie the other day called The Miracle Morning. Have you heard of that book?
I don't think so.
Well, they just made a movie about it, and it's all about the successful routines that people do in the morning. Like, we're talking like super successful, uber successful people. And there were many, of course, routines that people did. But what they found was that almost every single one of these people had meditation as part of their ritual.
Yes.
So
And by the way,
that's
now
huge.
I do it because I want to do it. Now it's not I have to do it. It's I want to do it. So there's a whole different energy around that. It's a non-negotiable for me. I'm going for my walk no matter what, every day.
I love that you brought that up, because that is so true. Because when you have to do something, that almost puts a negative energy around it, right?
Right.
You
And that's
have
how
to
it
go
used to
work
be.
out. Yeah. And
Exactly.
now you get to. So
Right.
that's
Exactly.
beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
Thank you.
So my last question for you is, if your life's work was being summarized in a news article, what would the headline be?
Wow. The happiness doctor spreading happiness to you. I don't know. I mean, something about that. I mean, something about spreading happiness for sure. Like,
I
and that's
love it.
that's my mission in life. My mission in life is to leave this world a better place than I found it. I mean, and I've known that since I was a young man, actually. And I've tried to live that to the best of my abilities. Obviously not perfect, but to make a difference in people's lives, in organizations' lives, and to me, you know what they say, the extra mile lane is never crowded. Always go the extra mile
So true.
in your relationships, from your intimate relationships, your family relationships, to your customer service, to your colleagues and your teammates at work. Just go the extra mile and see what miracles will happen in your life.
I love that. And I want to tell you, you've already made a difference in my life. And I'm so excited that I'm going to get to share you with our audience, because I don't think it's fair that I get to meet all these great people and I don't get to share you with everybody. So this is going to be amazing. So how do people find you?
Just to go on LinkedIn, Elia Gourgouris, PhD, the happiness doctor. That's probably the best way to connect with me, is my LinkedIn profile. Instagram, I'm also there, but LinkedIn would probably be the best way. And
All
and my
right.
website is dreliagourgouris.com or thehappinesscenter.com, either one of those.
Excellent. And we'll have that information in the show notes so that everybody knows how to spell your name and all that good stuff. So
Yeah.
this has been an amazing journey. And I just have one last thing to say to you.
Okay.
You are a VIP.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on your podcast. I love your energy and your positivity and your smile.
Oh,
And I even love the fact that your phone rang. I mean, that was kind of cool.
it was just dinging. I'm so sorry.
And that's a wrap for today. Join us next week here on the We Are VIP podcast. We'd love to know how we can help you be a VIP. To find out more, log on to wearevip.com.